You're listening to the Spy-Fi After Dark podcast. Make yourself comfortable.
It's gonna be a long ride.
It's gonna be a long night. Alex and Mitty back in the bed. It's been a minute. All right, welcome back to Spy-Fi After Dark.
What's going on, everyone? It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. This is episode 2, though, so it won't be as much of a minute.
Okay, fair enough. We're all hanging in there with what's been going on recently with
Which
COVID.
We talked about in episode 1.
Correct.
So check that out if you haven't listened to it. But if you're sick and tired of hearing of this disease, like all of us, pun intended, we'll talk about something else today.
Be a little more refreshing. Something that hopefully a lot of the audience can relate to. Millen and I are planning to have a deeper dive in the subject of like career development and how someone really plans out their career, their future, steps they can take now, things like that. Stuff that is pretty much an imperative for adulthood. Millen and I have been talking about this on and off for years. We figured like, why not like share this through an episode? So.
And particularly like over the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's been more and more frequent. He and I have been talking about this, as we get older. I'm a few years older than Millen, but he recently made a switch. I've been contemplating doing the same thing. And he and I have talked about things like that, which are more short term in our careers, and also like whether or not we have some kind of big plan in the future, and how do we position ourselves now versus just doing something for more money or, some kind of convenience up front. Millen doesn't want to stay in his current field forever. I don't want to do the same, or I don't want to do what I'm doing now in the future either. So we have that in common.
Yeah, I think I just want to transition to a different part of the field over time. And obviously in my case, like I have entrepreneurial ambitions, so that's really the long run goal.
Right.
But I figured we'd talk a little bit about careers. It's particularly appropriate now because the economy is dropping, so people are losing their jobs, and people are probably considering what they actually want to do with their career moving forward.
That's right.
Whether or not they lost their jobs or not.
So so regardless of like the urgency for those that lost their job, we also now, and we as in just people at home, have really more time than ever to self-reflect and focus on themselves, their current predicaments, their aspirations, things they want to do for themselves in the future. We get comfortable in structure and routine. I've noticed that, at least regarding myself, like I've had a lot more time to really kind of shake things up, try a few new things, plan out my future. I don't think I'm alone with that, just have a lot of time at home now, time that I didn't really have. And I'm actually appreciating that aspect. You know what I mean? I mean, even venturing and looking at opportunities, and this is a short-term thing. That in and of itself is at the least a part-time job and takes away from you. Now we actually have kind of the luxury to do things like that, to say, hey, like what's out there? And like many places, you may have a hiring freeze. It may be hard to get a job.
But this is a good time to prepare yourself for a job
research. Exactly.
Yeah, but beyond research, it's also a good time to invest in some skill sets that might help you with that job.
And
search.
then that was something else I was going to bring up to your point too. Like, you have more time to actually invest in yourself. So like with time you have now, you can essentially say, hey, like, am I happy with my trajectory? Am I not? Okay, what's out there? What's something I can look at and maybe consider doing this year or in the next however many years? And then how am I going to get there? And to your point, we have more time now where we can say, hey, I think in order to get from position A to B, I should probably start developing X or Y skills, maybe learn programming language. This is what Millen does, or some kind of skill set, something technical, maybe something that's just going to get you to where you want to be. And then the cool thing is with what we've had going on with COVID, even when we all go back to our kind of routine structure, we've built habits that aren't just going to go away. But those habits probably wouldn't have been built, had there not have been this kind of stretch of leisure. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think even if you still have a job, now is a good time to, and say you're looking at making an improvement in your job. Now is a good time to look at those skills you can maybe invest in. And some of them you might even be able to do in your current job. You can find opportunities to do more in your current job just to build the experience.
100%.
And then you're in a good position to find something new later. Because I mean, like when I was looking for my current job, I was not only doing a full-time job and going to the office every day, but I was also building an app, to build my skills in the direction I wanted to go with my career. I was starting this podcast and doing like media stuff too, which was for me. And I was just really running myself ragged. Like I was so tired and burnt out so often that it honestly made it harder for me to even do my day job. Mm-hmm. And it certainly slipped towards the end there.
Yeah. It's
not that I really had enough to do anyway, but
that's the thing. Like you may not be like overclocking, but just having all of these things in mind that you want to get done can take away from your bandwidth. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be going balls to the wall at work for it to be impactful on you. Like just having to get ready mentally, prepare yourself to go to work, kind of deal with whatever. It could be like a relatively
mentally decompress when you get back.
Yeah. It could be a relatively lower paced job,
especially if it's stressful for you. Like you don't just get back home and immediately bounce into whatever you want to do.
You're not a machine. You're not going to switch from one. I mean,
like for me towards the end, it was not a stressful job on the surface. Like the biggest problem is we didn't have enough work. And so I didn't have stuff to do for most of the day. Mm-hmm. And then I also was getting blamed for it, but that's a whole other situation. And so it wasn't a stressful job, but when I got home, I was so exhausted mentally because I have to go through like a circus every day that I couldn't just immediately bounce into whatever I was going to do. I'd like get home at say 5:30, 5:15, maybe 5. Let's say I left at 4:40 and I got home at 5. And then I'd eat and then I'd like just chill, just like watch YouTube or play games till like 8. Mm-hmm. And then by then I'm like, okay, now I can focus on something else. Yep. And then I have 2-3 hours left in the night to do something aside from, taking a shower and taking care of myself before I go to sleep.
And everyone operates a little differently. Some people can get away with certain routines easier than others. But at the end of the day, again, we're all human. Like, you can be efficient with your time, but we all have those commonalities. Like we need to decompress. We need to unload and de-stress. And like, if you're jam packing your schedule to be as productive as possible, sometimes it can lead to spinning wheels. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if you're in a place where you don't really like your job, then it's not realistic.
Right.
Because you need buffer time before and after. And if you don't have it, you will run yourself into the ground.
I can say that my previous job and this job takes time away from me, even when I'm not at work. It's hard for me to.
I think we both kind of had actually, now that I think about it, we both kind of had a similar situation with our previous jobs towards the end.
Yeah.
Just in your case, you had a good manager, so it wasn't as hard on you.
Right. I never got blamed. See, that's even more toxic. I had a slightly different predicament, but yeah, I mean, long story short, you and I had jobs that demanded our time, but didn't really demand growth. There wasn't that much to do. It was just a job that we needed to be present for. We needed to allocate some span of our time, which is enough to take away from anything else you and I want to do. Now I work at a company that has a much more demanding environment. I have learned more in a shorter amount of time. Like you, I try to invest in myself outside of work. I'm trying to kick off something with my previous manager. I can't really talk much about it, but there's things like this. But to your point,
hold on real quick.
Oh, go for it.
I just realized I forgot to record the video. All right. Should be good now.
Are you saying we should restart?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'll put a bumper at the beginning and be like, hey, by the way, I just forgot to.
Okay, cool. No, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, we all have a bandwidth and that is one aspect I've noticed that has let me appreciate getting older is that like I'm learning what I can and cannot get away with mentally. It's not just about like the physicality of getting older. Like I'm realizing how much stress I can handle and how to like manage my time a little better because again, like, you know, to your point, the podcast that you've set up, all of these other projects that you have, these avenues outside of work, they require your time, but they're not a sprint. None of them are a sprint. It's actually counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So it's all about like, you know, the marathon. And I'm really realizing that, you know what I mean? So again, a time like this, when we have a little more freedom to like kind of like dump some time we wouldn't have into things like this, it's so appreciated. It's so appreciated.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, the beauty of everyone working from home is that, you know, invariably you will get more time for yourself one way or another. Like,
of course,
you're going to spend less time on work if you're working from home.
Of course.
Whether you, I mean, obviously there's a commute for a lot of people. You don't have a commute anymore. That's big. But even on your work time itself, you're not working the same amount of hours.
No, I mean, the landscape in a corporate setting, the landscape could like regarding like how your job, like the dynamics of your job could change slightly. Like for instance, like,
and most likely you're working more efficient hours. So whatever you do work, like you'll get the same work done. You'll just get it done faster.
No. So, right. So a couple of things. One, with what you were bringing up before, like one adaptation I've seen with my team is that we are having more meetings. Right.
Okay. Interesting.
But that's fine though, because there's still inherent flexibility with making those meetings. Like I work remotely. I can make those meetings however I feel is necessary, you know, by phone, by laptop, whatever. And it's not like an overwhelmingly larger amount of meetings. It's just, I've noticed that there's more and it's for engagement. I understand. To your point though, like I'm getting as much work done at home, if not even more now because of the compounded amount of flexibility I have in my work schedule. The beauty of the situation that we're going through, and I actually brought this up like a month ago, I think either to you or to a couple of my friends, is that I had hoped that corporate culture may change widespread throughout the United States because there is going to be a profound observation on this. Like, hey, like if
I think a lot of companies are going to realize, hey, this is just as efficient as our normal operations, and we could scale down our building and save a bunch of money every year.
Not to brag, but I was talking about this like a while. I'm like, I hope that's what happens because any hit that companies are going to take are probably not going to be justifiably tied to just an all cause like lower productivity. It's really due to like business. Like,
I mean, I really hope more businesses will accommodate a 50-50 in-office remote schedule. Like, no, obviously full remote is not right for everyone. I don't even think it's right for me, but having a 2 or 3 day a week remote is awesome.
Of course.
And being able to accommodate that means that businesses can move to a flexible workplace where they have a lot less square footage because they'd expect less people to be in the office. And then you have shared desks, which, people don't like shared desks. But if it's a shared desk, but you still have a lot of space, does it really matter? And if you're laptop only?
I mean, let's be honest. Fridays right now are not even real work days.
Yeah.
For most companies.
Let's be honest. For most office workers, the stats that I've read are most office workers say they do 2 to 3 hours of real work a day.
That's not a productive day.
Yeah. Out of the 8.
It's the 8 framework. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because 8 plus lunch. So technically 9.
It's believed to be like kind of rhythm based. People work, based on their rhythm. We all have our like peaks and.
Well, and like for me, like now that I'm working from home every day, my peak productivity times are like 10 to 12.
Right.
And then like 6 to 8. There's like a really wide gap in the middle. And the best thing for me, as far as like my psyche goes, is to do like chores, cleaning, maintenance, all that kind of stuff in the middle of the day.
That's what I do too.
Errands, shopping, anything like that. I like doing that in the middle. That's the best time for me to do it.
It's actually a catalyst because, the way my work structure is set outside of the current predicament we're in with COVID, you can probably relate to this. I'm sure many people in the audience can as well. If you have a lot of things you need to get done outside of work, that immense pile of to-dos becomes sometimes overwhelming and very, very stressful. But if you can like chip at it as you please, it like almost gives you like small doses of like reward. Does that kind of make sense?
A little dopamine burst.
Yeah, I get a little dopamine burst when I'm like cleaning, cooking, and
Which just
like
gives you some momentum.
exactly. It's like I can like keep throwing, to your point, like momentum at my day. I have a similar structure to you. Like I'll get up, I'll hit work, right? For a little bit, then I'll go grab coffee. I'll come home, do a little more work. Then I'll clean. I'll start cooking. Maybe I'll go run an errand, do more work. I'll always have my phone on me. So I'm always tied if need be. I'll get to meetings. But essentially I'm never completing work and having like a very, very stressful night ahead where now I'm trying to figure out, okay, am I going to be able to like cook, go to the gym, clean, do these kind of things. And it's nice. I really like this flexibility. I
think a lot of people are having the same realization.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Around the country. They're like, this is amazing.
I haven't talked to like any current students. I'm curious how that's panning out for students. I feel like it's not the same. Like that's a different debate.
School is, it's hard to comment on. It's been a while since I've been in it now.
Right.
And school is never really a good fit for me anyway, but I think I would have done better on the one hand with a schedule like this, because the biggest problem for me was like the rigidity of the class schedule. That was the biggest problem I had. And then the other problem being like the, what's the word I want? The, not uselessness, but irrelevance of homework assignments.
Right.
So like those were like my main problem. So I guess the latter really wouldn't be changed at all, but at least I wouldn't have like a rigid class schedule to follow, and I could just like, if I have something to do, then I can go and view the lectures. Are you saying
you would have preferred to have been like fully online?
I think so.
Okay. I think there's
so
some bias,
with the exception being like, I loved on campus life. The one year I was able to experience it, I loved it. So
of course. School is secondary.
Like that's cool. But
right.
Yeah, the actual school itself, it would depend on the class, but for a lot of my classes, the actual classes were just so boring. It's such a drag.
100%. I will say though, this is probably,
and it's not even that the material was necessarily boring. It just wasn't presented well.
Fine. And the quality of education.
The lecture style doesn't really work for it.
The quality of education was not there.
It's not even quality. It's just the lecture style just does not work for it.
You just don't learn that way optimally.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah. And I'm sure you're not alone. I will say though that that makes sense. I will say though that what you're suggesting may be tightly dependent on the education path. So like, so like things like on the sciences, like, the biological sciences and stuff, it would be nicer to have like hands-on experiences, like labs and things like this. I don't know if like a full online curriculum can really replace some of that.
Yeah, it's highly dependent on what you do. But I mean, there's also a whole other discussion about like, is the 4-year college framework even efficient for a lot of things? No,
I mean, I agree with you. I don't think it is at all.
So the reason that I think work does so well in a remote setting for a lot of people is that it's just basically like constantly having a project. It's like constantly having a school project, or having multiple school projects at the same time. And so because things are a little more discrete and you have like objectives and you just work towards them in your own way, like I think that's why it meshes with people. And because you have the flexibility, you can do it when it best suits you. And obviously you have to be careful in that it is easy to fall into a schedule of not doing as much work as you should. Like let's be clear, it's easy to do that.
Right.
But if you are prescient about your day and you don't just take the day passively, it's not terribly difficult to stay on top of what you need to stay on top of.
Fine. Yes.
So
time management.
Yeah. It's all about having you need just a little bit of self-starter energy and then a little bit of structure from your team.
Not to like deviate too far from your train of thought, because I like it, but just by the way, my gripe with school and how there seems to be more value regarding like growth potential in like the work environment for me versus in a school setting is that at a young age, I came to this conclusion that school was about like at the core of it, school was about competition. You could say the same for the work environment, except not really, not in the same manner. Here's why. In school, you're essentially trying to go from start to finish over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And your finish is archived, right? It's essentially a race from start to finish, and every single race is archived, right?
It's timed, yeah.
Yeah, it's timed. And like at the end of the day, all that really matters are your time. Like you know what I mean? It's people are just going to look at that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because you're not producing like real deliverables.
You're not creating things.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And the thing about it is,
well, that's also program dependent, but even when you are creating
100% you're right.
Even when you're like, even in my degree program, which had a heavy emphasis on creating things, you're not really creating real deliverables.
You're not creating real things because if you remember in school, generally curriculum is not cutting edge. Your curriculum isn't developing new things for curriculum. You're being taught things that have been established. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit, but you know what I mean? At least in the workforce, like there is some agency. Like the company you work for is trying to get somewhere and you're on that ride. You may not be the most important person alive. Mm-hmm. You may even be undervalued.
Yeah.
That's a common paradigm, right? But like at the end of the day, you know you're actually doing something for some purpose, even if it's not the perfect purpose. Do you know what I'm kind of saying?
Yeah, there's context to everything.
There's context. Like it's not really the same. If you're looking from the outside in.
That's the difference between a real deliverable and a fake deliverable. It's like what it means.
Yeah.
Because a real deliverable has a context.
Right. Because like
versus a fake deliverable is arbitrary.
Yeah. It's like, you know, when you work for a company, you could be a workhorse and like a lot of your efforts could be to someone else's benefit. You're delivering X and Y and someone else may be getting more credit, too much credit. Well, it's going to get, you know, your efforts are going to get diluted and lost in some kind of corporate process. But at the end of the day, it's still retained within the corporation, right? Mm-hmm. Your efforts mean something to the corporation. You just don't always know like where exactly it's going to. If you're getting the reciprocity and recognition for it, fine. But again, in school, it doesn't really matter what you do. All that matters is what you do with respect to what is asked. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
You can't really impress and do more and contribute back to the school.
Yes.
You can't. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That would be an interesting concept for like a way to change up school, as if you can develop curriculums that are self-evolving.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea. It's probably worth exploring in a different podcast
I think
episode.
I think we talked with Hans about that. I do believe that if you pursue,
we talked about some similar topics, but
yes,
this is like a
directly.
specific,
right?
Like having a self-evolving curriculum.
Right.
It's actually kind of pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's we should bookmark that for a future podcast episode.
Oh, I'd be down.
That's a good concept to explore.
But that's the beauty of like pursuing a higher level like education, that you could go to university and you could essentially be an influence.
Yeah, I think you see that a little bit more at like master's and PhD, particularly the PhD level.
That's what we had talked about.
Because then it's like you're doing research at a PhD level, like you're contributing back to academia, right at that point. But you're right that, you know, there should be probably some more element of that earlier on. early on in your school, because it's easy to disrespect your education because there's none of that. And that's part of the problem, is like you have no context for what you're doing, and it makes it hard for you to ground yourself in what you're learning.
Like so, even at the higher level of my education, I'll give you an example, like my design class.
For the context of the listeners, Alex has a master's degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like in my undergrad, my design class, which is senior level for biomedical engineering, a large percentage of the projects in my class had been done before. Right?
Yeah.
Because the availability of what we could do, all within the context of like the education we provided, the resources at hand, on site, and the advancement of the field itself was not there. Do you know what I'm saying? So like the biomedical field is growing tremendously, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's benefiting or correlating with the resources available at my university.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm kind of saying?
It does highly depend on
university
the kind of program you're doing and the university you're
the
at.
resources allocated towards it, right?
Yeah, it's the resource, and it's how resource intensive is work in the field.
Right. And plus it's like an undergrad too. Like
if you're doing software or something like that, it takes no resources to do that. Yes. You have a laptop and you can do it.
You're not gated at all.
Right. There's literally no constraints put on that.
Right.
Like it even used to be, obviously at one point it was, you had to have computing equipment, which is expensive. It's not expensive anymore. And then at one point you had to have software that was expensive, like IDEs and all that kind of stuff to build with.
And that's readily available.
Now you don't have to do that either. Right. Now you can find free stuff for any tool you could need. You can find a free version that's good. But if you're doing like engineering, like that kind of work has gates. Like you need resources to do the work.
Yeah.
So it makes it harder to train practically.
Because if you think about it, with engineering, like having.
But there's a lot of opportunity for schools to do practicum curriculum for programs like programming that have no overhead.
Of course, 100%.
Right, you have a lot of opportunity to just teach to that.
It even ties back to
today.
It even ties back to the discussion we had earlier about online.
Yeah,
I mean it's very viable for university. So I agree with you 100%. Like in biomedical, for instance, like it's tough because biomedical doesn't mean anything. It could be anything from prosthetics to diagnostics, right? How as a college are you going to be able to provide such a wide array of resources for your class to really have access to? Do you know what I'm kind of saying?
The only way you could do it is if you made partnerships with business.
Exactly.
If you put partnerships in place and just had like some of your classes as a BME student or basically internships.
Yes.
And the company it probably doesn't have to devote many resources, devotes like 1 or 2 staff members to work with these students.
We actually did do that.
Right?
Yes.
So something like that is like, it's a relatively small investment for the company if it's just 1 or 2 people for part of the week. No big deal.
It's mutual benefit too, especially
and then they get to influence the curriculum. They get preferable hiring position.
Right.
The graduates have already heard of them, so they get preferable name recognition. So
even the availability of those positions would probably a meritocracy from the school side, meaning like that position would come from, let's just say, a Gore or a BD or a striker, right? And then 10 students are like in on that. Well, the professor knows that the availability is 3 students, and the professor is going to pick the 3 top students. That's to the benefit of those OMs. So I like that idea. I think it helps everyone.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time for schools in quarantine and being 100% virtual. I feel really bad for particularly like middle school, high school kids, because obviously for them, like this is a lot more disruptive to their lives.
Like behaviorally or growth.
Yeah. Because so much of their school is not just about school. It's also about all the social stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And about all the personal growth in that sense. And so they're missing out on a lot of that. And on top of that, they haven't grown enough to where being able to focus 100% on your own is easy for them.
Well, yeah, junior high and high school kids aren't going to be able to capitalize on time like this.
Exactly. They're going to have a much harder time managing their time and staying productive and staying on top of things because they just haven't been taught to do those things. And it's not taught in high school or middle school. The only time you get taught by that is if you have really good parents. That's who will teach you. Or you learn it in college by messing up and then learning it the hard way.
Right.
So yeah, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll circle back to more of the career side as opposed to the school side.
Sounds good.
Hey there, podcast listeners. This podcast is proudly sponsored by me. That's right, me. I'm here to tell you about a project I've been working on called the Iowa Caucus. It's a democracy technology project with an accompanying live stream that will be happening sometime in June. Basically, a friend and I are building a real caucus software. This project is based on the now famous debacle that's known as the 2020 Iowa Democratic Caucus, when the Iowa Democratic Party utilized a new technology for the first time in running its caucus. Except the technology kind of failed really bad. The thing is, the software that you'd use to run a caucus is not actually that complicated. And so my friend and I wanted to basically just build it. And we're going to run a live stream mock caucus or Maucus to prove that it works. Head on over to iowamaucus.com because I know you want to learn more about it. Sign up for email updates. We'll keep you updated along the way. I promise we'll use your email very responsibly, more responsibly than pretty much everyone else in politics. And we are going to need a few volunteers to actually make the Maucus happen. It's a really, really small commitment of time, but we do need people to fill the spots for the live stream. So once again, head on over to iowamaucus.com, sign up for updates, sign up to be a part of the caucus if you want to be a part of it. Like I said, it's a small commitment. We're talking 5 to 10 minutes of your day. Anyways, that is it for me. Let's get back to the episode. All right, and we are back. So I wanted to circle back a little bit to where we started, which was right now, a lot of people are probably considering what they want to do with their careers in their life. I know I have been, even though I'm very happy with my current job. And I have only been there for 6 months or so. I know you've been thinking about it. We've obviously been talking about it on the phone outside of this podcast.
Right. Yeah, I've been approaching a year and a half now in my current position.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah.
Almost a year and a half.
You started December
2018.
November.
Yeah, December.
And then, it was last year and I started October, basically November. So yeah, we're actually pretty close.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's topical for a lot of people. They're seeing their friends out of work or they are out of work themselves and they're thinking about what they want to do. And the thing is, like, obviously we're going to be hurting for a little while economically.
Of course.
And obviously I don't want to minimize that, but in a recession, the truth is there is opportunity, and recessions are oftentimes they're a good time for resourceful people, because resourceful people will find opportunity and put themselves in a good position for when things come out of the recession.
Yeah, shifts.
Because the key with a recession is you want to prepare for the time when we leave the recession, because that's when things start picking up. And if you're in a good position, you can really capitalize and turn your life around, frankly.
100%.
Which is why obviously the biggest thing you can do in a recession is buy stuff. Like if you have the money, if you have the cash, buy up assets because they're going to be cheap. Obviously that's not really an option for most people. And unfortunately recessions tend to make the wealthy wealthier as a result, because they're the ones who have cash.
That's just generally how it is.
But for average people, the same thing applies, except instead of cash, we're talking skill sets. And in your job. So, I mean, say you're working a job that is highly susceptible to automation / elimination / streamlining with software in the future, because a lot of people are. Now is a pretty good time to think about what you might want to do after that.
On that same note, whether or not,
or frankly, how you could evolve what you do currently.
And I'll agree with you that this is like a good time for those who are resourceful to capitalize, but this is also a wake-up call for many people who don't ever think that job security is like an impending problem, right? So for instance, like there are certain positions or certain career paths that generally are known to be safe. But those paths are not exempt from situations like this. And situations like this are very real. And so it's like a wake-up call. You know what I'm saying?
And even those safe career paths are not necessarily safe anymore. A career path may be considered safe for 50, 100 years, and then all of a sudden it's not safe. Like a good example is lawyers. Now, this hasn't quite happened yet.
I've heard of this. I know
it's happening.
I know you're going.
We're on the cusp of it. It's about to happen. There is software being developed to rapidly automate low-level law work. So people who do a lot of routine law work are going to be replaced by software. Yes. There's going to be software that has catalog databases of precedent and can automatically find related precedent for you. So it's going to cut down your research time. There's going to be ones that can write and fill out forms instantly. So a lot of the low-level stuff on that level will be completely gone. And you're going to basically cut down the need for most grunt law work.
Grunt work like across
grunt work in general is out the door. But this is just a particularly stark example because we've heard for a long time, going to law school is a really safe career, and it's not. It's really not. It's the people who say that, it is irresponsible to say at this point.
Same with medicine. Same with medicine. So from the diagnostic side, a lot of clinical decisions are made. I'm talking specifically with imaging.
Yes, radiology is going to be the big one. Radiology is going to, because there's already software that's been developed that they've done a test run of the software against a bunch of different radiologists,
and the software was as good or
more
better,
accurate. Yeah. After learning from like 1,300 cases or something, like a relatively small pool. So those types of careers, if you're in a career that has a lot of grunt work involved, your career is going to be automated. Now, that's obviously bad in the sense that it's going to put you out of work, but it also gives you an opportunity to change what you do.
Just those who are, it's not just being resourceful, being adaptive is incredibly important.
Well, being adaptive is incredibly valuable. Historically speaking, like evolution is based on adaptability. And the same applies to human society because human society is just an extension of humanity. But, and also particularly if you are a grunt worker, chances are you probably aren't super thrilled about your job either.
Yeah.
And so
now you have an external stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. You have an external reason to reinvent yourself anyway.
Again, like when you get caught in structure, it's very, very hard to change.
And to be clear, I don't want to fall into the trap of saying like, oh, you should just # learn to code or whatever. Like, I don't think that's right for everyone. Obviously,
that's not the only, like, and that's
not the only thing. That's my point. It's not the only thing you can do. It's right for some people. And if it is right for you, it is a lucrative career. And take it from me, it's a very rewarding career if you're in the right workplace. And even if you're not, it's somewhat rewarding in the short term until you can find a better one. And you can almost always find a better job. But aside from code, like any sort of service job is not going to be automated. Anything that's human to human.
If you contribute to humans, like if you're a manager, right. If you're in sales, if you're considering like entrepreneurial, like opportunities.
That's the other thing is there are a lot of ways to independently make a living.
Yes.
And the thing is, the beauty of this thing is as resources get freed up from grunt work positions, those resources are going to have to find another place to go. And ideally, and this may or may not happen as smoothly as we would like, but ideally, you'd see companies would start saving money by automating stuff, and they would turn those savings into either A, paying their current employees better, or B, cutting their prices and providing consumers with a better service for less money, which saves you money. So resources are going to be freed up to go to other things, and people are going to spend more time and more money on other things that are not things we'd spend money on today. So I think we'll see like coaching, therapy, any sort of personal and interpersonal career has a bright future ahead, because as resources get freed up from grunt work and people ideally have more money at the end of the month to spend on themselves, they'll find ways to spend it on themselves. And so you'll find coaches, you'll find educational opportunities, you'll find people will start learning things, not because they want a career, but because they just want to learn something. Like they just want to build a new skill for the sake of building a new skill. And then I think there's also a whole other side of, there's going to be a lot of interpersonal coaching. This my personal theory is interpersonal coaching is going to be a growth market for the next 20 years, because we are in an increasingly digital society where we are being disconnected from each other, and we're losing a lot of our interpersonal skills and abilities.
It's also incredibly important to have some kind of mentorship. And I will say that, like,
yes,
we also live in a world now where career development and just development in general needs to be refined, because everyone can do it. And
also, by the way, aside from totally changing your life, another option is just embracing the automation in your current path. Like, you can become the automation expert for your field. Like, if you work in, let's say you work as let's say you work as a lawyer. Let's use that as an example. You can pivot yourself to learn about the software that's coming out and how it works and how to utilize it and best utilize it. And then you can become that resource, and you can continue your work as a lawyer and use those tools to do your job better and more efficiently. And your firm may lay off a couple of your other lawyer coworkers, but they might retain you because you know what you're doing. And by the way, it might retain you at a higher salary.
Right.
So you might be able to find yourself in a better position.
Right.
That's another option. And frankly, a lot of people aren't going to do that naturally. A lot of people aren't going to change until they're forced to change, whereas you have an opportunity now to get ahead of it. Mm-hmm. So if you have the wherewithal, you should.
No, I agree with that.
So
I'm not quite, it's going to be tough. It's tough for me to believe that like things like automation are going to feed into like coaching and mentorship. And I don't know if,
I think it will.
I would hope. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I would hope.
I mean, the dystopian version is that the rich just use it to retain more wealth. But
yes, that's what I'm worried about.
I'm worried about it too. But I'm choosing to use a slightly more positive outlook.
Now, what you're suggesting,
put that intention out into the world.
Yeah. Speak into existence. Yeah. No, what you're suggesting is awesome. Hypothetically.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think
it'd be incredibly healthy for humanity. And that's why I think a lot of people are kind of freaking out about the recession, right?
Why wouldn't you?
I know there's a lot of logical reasons to do so. I'm not personally, and it also comes from the fact that I'm not going to be affected like a lot of people will be.
Yeah.
So there's privilege involved too.
First of all, yeah, if you're employed and you retain your job, there you go. That's nice.
Yes.
Also, if you don't own a business, that's also kind of nice.
Yeah. So I'm actually, from a personal perspective, I'm in the best position I could probably be
in terms of being impacted. I agree.
Yes.
And I'm in the same boat.
So there's from that side, like I'm already naturally going to have a less visceral reaction because I'm not likely to be hit as badly.
And this is outside of the fact that you've always implied that you have a more positive
Exactly.
an opportunistic
and
way
so
of
on
thinking.
top of that, I'm also taking an opportunistic.
I mean,
view
look,
on the world.
like there's only so much we can do in a situation like this. Why not use
exactly
Yeah.
like your locus of control is only so wide, so you might as well exercise it with the space you've got.
Yeah.
So
To your point, having this kind of mindset and trying to become more, how do I say this? More cognizant of your future is like a muscle that many people may not even be exercising. Whether or not you become like in the short run, like successful finding a new job or being able to position yourself and get some kind of return this year, just thinking this way is healthier
100%.
than being at the general whim of your routine, which usually incorporates an employer and not much outside of that to your benefit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
It's healthy to even again, we talked about this, like this situation can be a very healthy avenue for people.
Yes. It's all about outlook
And perspective. Yeah. So
but the unfortunate reality is that chances are if you're in a position where you need that outlook, you're less likely to have it, because that's just kind of how the world works. You know, the haves get more, the have-nots get less. It just seems to be kind of how nature is set up. Like everything's kind of exponential by default.
feedbacks.
Yeah, feedback loops and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So, but I mean, again, it's an opportunity if you're in that position and you're worried. I know it's hard sometimes to listen to someone who's not impacted the same way you are, and I'm not trying to take away where you're at, but consider taking a slightly different tack to the situation and you might find yourself in a better position afterwards. Just a thought. So I figured we'd maybe talk a little bit about our own careers to round this out. Hey there, podcast listeners. This is Millen Singh, host of Spy-Fi After Dark. I'm here to just please ask you to rate and or subscribe on whatever platform you might be listening on. It really makes a really big difference to us, and it makes us feel really good about ourselves, so you really should just do it for that reason alone, honestly. But seriously, it boosts our organic search rankings and makes it easier for people to find the podcast. And so it would really help us out a lot if you could shoot us a rating, subscription, whatever's applicable on whatever platform you might be listening on. Anyways, that's it for me. Let's get back to the episode. So I figured we'd maybe talk a little bit about our own careers to round this out. And to talk sort of more about career advancement, because we've been talking about it a lot lately. We have like 10-ish minutes left, maybe a little bit over that.
Sure.
So as we mentioned, I made a career move late last year. That was a really great career move for me. It was a big change. And I'm really happy with my job currently, but just because I'm happy with my job doesn't mean I don't think about the future. That's another thing, by the way, is if you are happy in your job, I think a lot of people tend to get a little placated, you know? They find a place they're happy at and they're just sort of like stay there and enjoy it.
Yeah, complacent.
And don't really complacent. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
No, I know. I mean, I get it.
So I'm happy with my job, and on the one hand, I think it would be easier for me to get complacent. And I kind of was initially. I just focused on other things for a little while, which is fine. It was honestly healthy for me, so I'm not worried about that at all. But I still think about like where I want to go and like what are sort of the end points. And that's just like me personally. My outlook is I always zoom out. Everything I think about, I zoom out. If I have a problem in front of me, I don't just try to solve a problem. I zoom out from the problem first before I take an approach, because I find that there's always like a greater context to a problem, or there's another route that's just not obvious when you're looking at the problem, and it only becomes obvious when you zoom out from it. And so that's just my personal approach. Anytime I have a problem, I always zoom out first. And I highly recommend that if you can in your life, and like make it a practice, because it's really healthy. But I'm still thinking about where I want to end up. But I know, again, like, as I mentioned, I have entrepreneurial goals, and that's the end goal for me. I know that's point B. The question is, what's point B1, B2, B3, B4 on the way there? So, I've still been thinking about that, and I want to move vertically from where I am, but I also want to make a slight tangent in the direction of leadership and business, because that's where I want to go ultimately, and that will help me push in that direction. And also, by the way, in my case, these things can feed each other, because I can do something entrepreneurial, which feeds back into my career. Like I can do something entrepreneurial to prove something, and then feed that back in by making a jump to a director position.
Yeah, you leverage that.
And in a lot of people's case, a lot of people have that option available to them, even though they may not realize
or vice versa too.
Yeah.
Because if you vertically climb the corporate ladder and you decide to leave and do something for yourself, like something independent, the network you develop.
Yeah.
Like if you become a director at,
yeah.
Think about who you have.
And everyone, I think a lot of people make like jumping off into entrepreneurship is like this huge risk, right? It's like, oh my God, you're throwing everything away. Like I get where that comes from, and it's kind of true, but at the same time, it's also not really true, because generally speaking, there's nothing stopping you from going back to what you were doing before. Like the worst case scenario is it doesn't work out and you have to go back to what you're doing before. And that's not necessarily that bad, unless what you're doing before was really bad, in which case then you want a different scenario.
But on that same token, to what you had mentioned before, you can usually find a better job anyway.
Exactly. And that's the other side is if you go off and you do your own thing and you really do it, like you really commit to it, you don't half-ass it, you will meet more people, you will expand your network, you will get new skills, you will build your resume one way or another, and you can turn that experience into a better job.
Yeah, that's actually one like hidden issue with a lot of positions out there, where if you're not interfacing with new people constantly, it's actually, I think, exponentially easier to become complacent, and that's more and more of a disadvantage for you because you are getting less exposure to what other opportunities lie.
Yeah, that's another feedback loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're, whether it's like a technical position or something else, like if you're not getting exposure to new things, it's going to be harder for you to really position yourself for like a jump later.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Versus just blindly doing it for the sake of change, which can work, but doesn't always work. So,
yeah. And I mean, I think it's unfortunate that in a lot of cases, in corporate, the reality is that today with corporate America, you are not incentivized to stay at a job.
Yeah, you told me about this, and it's totally. I actually agree.
What companies say, they give you no incentive to stay.
100%.
There's even at my current company, which is a very good company, like just Choice Hotels. If you want to work at Choice Hotels as a software engineer, it's a good job. Full stop. And it's the most. It's the best environment I've been exposed to. That's not saying much, but even in context of what I hear of jobs around the industry, this is very good. Even still, they really don't give me many incentives to stay for a long time. And it's like, it's kind of shitty to say, but at the same time, it's just reality. And like the only reason a lot of people stay at jobs is loyalty, because they're somewhat emotionally invested. They stay for emotional reasons. Ultimately, you stay because you are emotionally connected with your manager, with your team. You don't want to like leave them behind. You kind of want to be like in this together.
There's also fear,
and there's fear too.
Like the whole loss of like. Here's the thing: when it comes to like advancement in your career, the strange thing that I've noticed, and you and I talked about this. Actually, I think you brought this up to me recently. Maybe is that. Meritocracy or not, whether like that's integrated into like your work environment's culture at like a high level, you can't really do. I mean, for the average person, you can't really do a good job and expect to be rewarded without chasing the reward and showing that you want to be rewarded. That could be in the form of, a promotion, whatever kind of advancement, right?
Well, first of all, you have to constantly ask for it.
Okay, there's that. Okay,
which most people don't like to do.
And most people may feel uncomfortable doing that, myself generally included, but also recognize their tenure and have some kind of like sunk cost sh like emotional tie to knowing that they've contributed to their company and that their company must be appreciative because that appreciation is coming from job retention, friendships, and just general relationships at work, etc. I'm just taking a deeper dive into what you already said. Yeah. And having to do that over again and that loss of like tenure, if you will, it's not coming with you. On the flip side of everything I said, I'm going to go against it. So like I've noticed where I work.
Classic metaphor.
Yeah. I've noticed where I work. If I kind of like take the positions of other engineers I work with respect to like their previous positions, former education, their age, I've noticed that engineers that come in to my company, usually, and I'm talking about like senior level and above for engineering, generally are positioned better and have higher positions than had they have come and stayed at a younger age. So for instance, if you want to go from engineer title A to B, it's going to take you longer than someone else spending less time and then coming somewhere to the company and
jumping to you.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there's a disproportionate value in experience outside of the company.
Yes. And unfortunately, part of this is because companies are increasingly viewing employees as kind of mercenaries, in the sense that they're like, well, people don't stay, so why should I invest in them?
That's another feedback
loop.
And
it's a feedback loop, because people don't stay because and this thing is, corporations started this, to be clear. Corporations started because there was a time, for a long time, where you were heavily rewarded for tenure in corporate America. I mean, I still remember this. Like, I was a kid, but I still remember like the zeitgeist being about this in the background.
Me too.
So there
my parents.
Exactly. Yeah. For my parents' generation, for sure. And for my grandparents' generation, 100%. There was a heavy reward attached to tenure. The longer you stayed, the more loyal you were, the more clout you had at the company, the easier it was to get promoted, the more you got paid. Like, they very much kept investing in you. And then what happened was, let me get a little political here. What happened was the financialization of the economy in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then continuing afterwards, but particularly in those decades, turned companies, first of all, in a lot of cases, it turned the management of companies, the ownership of companies, over from the founders or like the founding family to investors and Wall Street. So that was the first component. Investors bought up a lot of companies and bought up a lot of assets. So companies got gutted at a leadership level, and you lost the like family dynamic
history,
right? And on top of that, because it was all financialized, everything became objective. It's all numbers based. And so they'd look at it and be like, we could just not give people raises and most of them would still stay. So there was a short-term incentive to start throwing out the legacy of how companies just treat employees.
Just rewarding. Yeah. And also just rewarding general legacy. Yeah. At a company.
Exactly. So there's an incentive to do that.
And there is a benefit to bringing in talent from elsewhere. It's a short-term benefit.
There is. Yes. Actually, I mean, I'd argue the best place to be as a company is a pretty healthy mix of existing legacy and fresh voices.
Yes.
I argue most cases that's true. Like a lot of things, I think probably the healthiest place to be is somewhere between where we are now and where we used to be. But companies started doing this because they got financialized, and all of a sudden it was all about their stock prices and the next month's or the next quarter's earnings or whatever, or the next quarter's profit margins. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, all the CEOs, their pay went from salary to stock bonuses. And so they were encouraged to like jack up stock prices and like do all kinds of manipulations to maximize their personal compensation. So all of this happened. And then as a result, employees finally, after decades, literally decades of getting screwed over, finally now in the 2010s, after the 2008 recession,
had access to What are you going to say?
I was going to say, finally, they realized we're getting screwed over constantly. We should not give companies the level of respect we've been giving them.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the stock incentives for employees became more regular. Oh, okay.
That's
got it.
Marginal.
Yeah.
But primarily it's after the 2008 recession, people.
Oh, you're saying it's just a cultural response.
Culturally, it's a cultural change. Like, because like I said, I still remember the zeitgeist before that. Again, I was a kid, but like I was still kind of plugged in. And like my teachers would talk about it occasionally or whatnot. But now the environment is very different from an employee perspective, because especially in like white collar careers that are like full of younger people, like generally the younger you are, the more this applies to you. But this whole notion of like put in your time and like do the work and be in the trenches, that's going all out the door. Mm-hmm. And I really notice it in software because obviously you have a high proportion of young people there, and it's a fast moving, fast evolving industry. So people are jumping jobs every 1.5 years on average. And it's even faster in like San Francisco, New York. And they're doing it because companies incentivize you to move, especially in an industry where there's a lack of talent, because they need to get people in to fill out their roster, and they're constantly losing people from their rosters. So they constantly have to bring people in. So the system will perpetuate itself. And so you have these people who have this mercenary mindset of, I am going to jump for the best opportunity and make the most of my career personally, because companies aren't going to treat me with respect. So why should I treat them with respect? And I'll do my work. I'll do a good job. As long as I'm there, I'll do a good job. I'll be a good team player. But if a good opportunity comes up, I'm going to take it.
Mm-hmm. It's a lack of trust between the employer and employee.
And so now I think because we're about to enter another recession, we're going to see an acceleration of that mindset in culture. And I hope that some older generations will see some of this too, because there's a lot of benefits to be derived from having that mindset. Because ultimately you should modulate your behavior as an employee to the behavior of your company. If you work at a company that genuinely rewards loyalty, and some still do, it exists. Mm-hmm. If they genuinely do, if they make it easy to climb the ladder, if they make it easy to get sizable raises every year for like actually improving yourself, if they make it easy to tie your performance to your compensation, then, you know, maybe give them a little bit more loyalty. Maybe be a little more consistent, stay there a little longer. If they're working for you, work for them. But if you're at a company like most that give a 3% cost of living raise at the end of the year, make it very difficult to find a promotion, or you don't have a manager that works with you to get there, then, don't feel bad about jumping.
Well, you're not missing much.
Yeah,
most likely your move will result in something similar. With a signing bonus and a slightly higher pay.
Exactly. But most likely you're going to have the same thing or better. Case.
Exactly.
With the signing bonus and better salary. Yeah,
100%.
Exactly.
So
yeah, I 100% encourage people to take a more active approach in their careers. And particularly now that we're entering a recession, this is a good time to assess your options, to build some skills, to make a lateral move or a lateral vertical move.
I'm trying to do a lateral vertical currently right now.
I think ultimately that's going to be on the table for me not too long from now.
Yep.
Within the next couple of years. So yeah, sort of just to wrap this episode up. I just, we've already said it 1,000 times, but we're entering this crazy period. It's going to be nuts. It's going to hurt a lot of people. Chances are it's going to hurt you a little bit or a lot. And I don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, if you can,
in a positive light,
if you
try
can
to capitalize,
can step back and
assess,
take a optimistic outlook for a minute and assess yourself and try to put yourself in a good position, you can find yourself in a better place when this recession is over than you are in currently.
Right.
And it's a real opportunity that is available to pretty much everyone. So, highly recommend it. Any final thoughts?
That's it. I agree. It's like a reboot, potentially, for a lot of people.
Recessions have opportunity.
Exactly. It's very, very difficult to just stop yourself in your routine.
It's not surprising that in the last recession, one of the biggest changes was a lot of people went back to school.
Right.
Like college enrollment rates shot up after 2008.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious with the demographic. I wonder if the spread was like wider or something.
Oh yeah, no, it was much wider.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, there were a lot more like 40-some-year-olds going to college.
Yeah, that makes sense.
My mom was one of them.
That's right.
Yeah, my mom went back. She ended up getting a doctorate degree and was a nurse practitioner. So yeah. So if you're out there and you're a little uncertain about the future, feel that, appreciate that, respect it, then take a step back, do what's right for you.
We love you. We support you.
Yeah.
You'll do great things.
Yeah. And if you have any questions about this episode or any of the content, you can email spyfiofficial@gmail.com and I will get back to you. I personally will get back to you. I'm not some celebrity with tens of millions of Instagram followers. So
you heard it from the man.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.